Holes. I hope you will enjoy as I read Holes in audio format. I will be reading chapter by chapter so it seems interesting as you are curious to know the whole story at its entirety. Introducing Holes by Louis Sachar. I'll be reading chapters 12 and 13. One part of chapter 12 is torn out, so I'll do the best I can to read chapter 12 to you, and then behind that, 13. Okay, let me go ahead and get started. All right, let's get started. Again, Stanley was the last one to finish digging. It was late afternoon when he dragged himself back to the compound. This time he would have accepted a ride on the truck if he was offered. When he got to the tent, he found Mr. Pedansky and the other boys sitting in a circle on the ground. "Welcome, Stanley," said Mr. Pedansky. "Hey, caveman, you get your hole dug?" asked Magnet. He managed to nod. "You spit in it?" asked Squid. He nodded again. "You're right," he said to X-Ray. "The second hole is the hardest." X-Ray shook his head. "The third hole the hardest," he said. "Come join our circle," said Mr. Pedansky. Stanley plopped down between Squid and Magnet. He needed to rest up before taking a shower. Next page. "We've been discussing what you want to do with our lives," said Mr. Pedansky. We're not going to be at Camp Green Lake forever. We need to prepare for the day we leave here and join the rest of society. "Hey, that's great, Mom," said Magnet. "They're going to finally let you out there." The other boys laughed. "Okay, Jose," said Mr. Pedansky. "What do you want to do with your life?" "I don't know," said Magnet. "You need to think about that," said Mr. Pedansky. "It's important to have goals. Otherwise, you're going to end up right back here in jail. What do you like to do?" I don't know, said Magnet. You must like something, said Mr. Pedanski. I like animals, said Magnet. Good, said Mr. Pedanski. Does anyone know of any jobs that involve animals? Veterinarian, said Armpit. That's right, said Mr. Pedanski. He could work in a zoo, said Zigzag. He belonged in the zoo, said Squid. Then he and X-Ray laughed. How about you, Stanley? Any ideas for Jose? Stanley signed animal trainer, he said, like for circus or movies or something like that. Any of those jobs sound good to you, Jose? Asked Mr. Pedanski. Yeah, I like what Caveman said about training animals for movies. I think it would be fun to train monkeys. Okay, here's where some of the page is ripped. I'm going to read where it's not ripped at. You don't know that, said Mr. Pedanski. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Nothing is in life is easy. But there is no reason to give up. You be surprised what you can accomplish if you set your mind to it. After all, you only have one life, so you should try to make it or make the most of it. Stanley tried to figure out what he'd say if Mr. Pedanski asked him what he wanted to do with his life. He used to think he wanted to work for the FBI, but this didn't seem the appropriate place to mention that. So far, you've all done pretty good job at messing up your lives, said Mr. Pedanski. I know you think you're cool. He looked at Stanley. So you're a caveman now, huh? You like digging holes, caveman? Stanley didn't know what to say. Well, let me tell you something, caveman. You are here on account of one person. If it wasn't for that person, you wouldn't be here digging holes in the hot sun. You know who that person is. My no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great great grandfather. The other boys howled with laughter. Even Zero smiled. It was the first time Stanley had ever seen Zero smile. He usually had such angry expression on his face. Now okay, this is where the page is torn. I have to read from here. Mr. Pedanski looked from one boy to another. You're all special in your own way, he said. You've got all some things to offer. You have to think about what you want to do, then do it. Even you, Zero, you're not completely worthless. The smile was now gone off of Zero's face. What do you want to do with your life? Mr. Pedanski asked him. Zero's mouth was shut tight as he glared at Mr. Pedanski. His dark eyes seemed to expand. What about Zero? Asked Mr. Pedanski. What do you like to do? I like to dig holes. Chapter 13. All too soon, Stanley was back out on the lake, sticking his shovel in the dirt. X-ray was right. The third hole was hardest. So what's the fourth hole? And the fifth hole? And the sixth hole? And the... He dug his shovel into the dirt. After a while, he'd lose track of the day of the week and many of the holes he dug. It all seemed like one big hole, and it would take a year and a half to dig it. He guessed he'd lost at least 5 pounds. He figured that in a year and a half, he'd be either in a great physical condition or else dead. He dug his shovel into the dirt. It couldn't always be hot, he thought. Surely it got cooler in December. Maybe then they froze. He dug his shovel into the dirt. His skin had gotten tougher. It didn't hurt so much to hold the shovel. Next page. As he drank from the canteen, he looked up at the sky, a cloud that appeared earlier in the day. It was the first cloud he could remember seeing since coming to Camp Green Lake. He and the other boys had been watching it all day, hoping it would move in front of the sun. Occasionally, it got close, but it was just teasing them. His hole was waist deep. He dug his shovel into the dirt. As he dumped it out, he thought he saw something glistening as it fell onto the dirt pile. Whatever it was quickly burned. Stanley stared at the pile a moment, unsure if it even seen it. Even if it was something, what good would it do him? He'd promised to give anything he found to X-ray. I didn't seem worth the effort to climb out of his hole to check it out. He glanced up at the cloud, which was close enough to the sun that he had to squint to look at it. He dug his shovel back into the earth, scooped out some dirt, and then lifted it over the dirt pile. But instead of dumping it there, he tossed it off to the side. His curiosity had gotten the better of him. He climbed up out of the hole and sifted his fingers through the pile. He felt something hard and metallic. He pulled it out. It was a gold tube, about as long and as wide as a second finger on the right hand. The tube opened at one end and closed at the other. He used a few drops of precious water to clean it. There seemed to be some kind of design on the flat closed end. He poured a few more drops of water on it and rubbed it in on the inside of his pants pocket. He looked again at the design engraved into the flat bottom of the tube. He could see an outline of a heart with the letters KB enriched into it. He tried to figure out some way that he could have to give it to X-ray. He could keep it, but it wouldn't do him any good. He'd want a day off. He looked at the large piles of dirt near where X-ray was digging. X-ray was probably almost finished for the day. getting the rest of the day off would hardly do him much good. X-ray would first have to show the tube to Mr. Sir and Mr. Podensky, who would then have to show it to the warden. By then X-ray might be done anyway. Stanley wondered about trying to secretly take the tube discreetly to the warden. He could explain the situation to the warden, and the warden might make up an excuse for giving him the day off so X-ray wouldn't suspect. He looked across the lake towards the cabin under the 2 oak trees. The place scared him. He'd been at Camp Green Lake almost 2 weeks, and he still hadn't seen the warden. That was just as well. If he could go his entire year and a half without seeing the warden, that would be fine with him. Besides, he didn't know if the warden would find the tube interesting. He looked at it again. It looked familiar. Next page, thought he'd seen something like it somewhere before, but couldn't quite place it. What you got there, caveman? Asked Zigzag. Stanley's large hand closed around the tube. Nothing, just, it was useless. I think I might have found something. Another fossil? No, I'm not sure what it is. Let me see, Zigzag. Instead of showing it to Zigzag, Stanley brought it to X-ray. Zigzag followed. X-ray looked at the tube, then rubbed his dirty glasses on the dirty shirt and looked at the tube again. One by one, the other boys dropped their shovels and came to look. It looked like an old shotgun shell, said Squid. Yeah, that's probably what it is, said Stanley. He decided not to mention the engraved design. Maybe nobody would notice it. He doubted X-ray could see it. No, it's too long and thin to be a shotgun shell, said Magnet. It's probably just a piece of junk, said Stanley. Well, I'll show it to Mom, said X-ray. See what he thinks. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the day off. Your hole almost finished, said Stanley. Yes, so? Stanley raised and lowered his shovel. So why don't you wait until tomorrow to show it to Mom? He suggested. You could pretend you found it first thing in the morning. Then you can get the whole day off instead of just an hour or so this afternoon. X-ray smiled. Good thinking, caveman. He dropped tube into the large pocket on the right leg of his dirty orange pants. Stanley returned to his hole. When the water truck came, Stanley started to take his place at the end of the line, but X-ray told him to get behind Magnet in front of Zero. Stanley moved up one place in the line. That was pretty good, and I'm wanted to let everybody know I'm sorry for the torn pages in chapter 12. Only one page was torn enough to not be able to read what I needed to read to y'all, but I hope it was enjoyable anyway, even though. All right, everyone, like, share, subscribe to my channel. Hit that notification button to know once I go live. Oh boy, ring that bell to update on my podcast. If you have a chatter letter that you would like to be read on my podcast, please send your letter to the Chatterbox Letters Podcast, Post Office Box 5556, Lakeland, Florida 33807. Please, you can write whatever you want to write in your chatter letters. Please keep it clean, your words clear and discreet. And I would like to say thank you for tuning in to the Chatterbox Letters podcast. Please don't hesitate to send your letter. Procrastinate and send your letter today.